Okay, we just got done with television history. Now I'm going to talk about the industry in general. We're going to talk about ratings and shares and how television works, public television, syndication, and some other aspects to understand the difference between an affiliate or an O&O, owned and operated. There's actually a lot more to it. But I'm just going to go over the basic highlights of this. So let's get started. Okay, television industry. How does it work? Well, this is what I'm here to tell you about, so you understand and you can explain it to other people. All right, so let's get into this. All right. Understand that I keep throwing it into your head. Electronic media, television, also movies and radio and PR and advertising. It's a business, all right. So you have to understand that it's always a business. These television, radio, and all these other things, they want to make money. And what is broadcasting's moneymaker? Usually I ask around, hey, which is it? Which is it? Well, the answer to that is advertising. Okay, they've always had advertising with newspapers and radio, and heck, they have advertising on the web and on YouTube and all these other things, and so that's basically how they make their money. So what are they selling when they sell advertising? They usually ask anybody. What they're basically selling, some people say time. Time is the units. They will do that when dealing with television, strictly television. But they're not selling time per se. They're selling exposure of a good or service. So if you're Joe's Pizza Shop or Mary's Flower Shop or Jean's um, just catering business, whatever. It's you have an opportunity to advertise and tell people, hey, I'm out there, and it will help your bottom line. And so that's how broadcasting, television, radio. That's how they spend. That's how they sell their advertising. People will know more about you here, and they have things that they figure out, and they show, hey, this is what you get on an increase when you do advertise with us, and how much on average people's business goes up. But yeah, so that's what they're selling. They're selling exposure of a good or service. All right. Now, to understand television and when they were developing it and how they were going to organize it, they wanted a sense of a local sense to it. All right, they wanted local. Yeah, they had networks. They understood that they had major networks coming from main cities and broadcasting all across the country, but they wanted this to have a local feel to it. They wanted a local feel to that specific community. So every station has a license, which they have to apply for and live up to certain things from the FCC. But they wanted to make sure it was specifically served that local community. Yes, you're getting the content and all that stuff from the major network, but they wanted each of the television stations to have its own flavor that served that community. And the CBS affiliate wouldn't necessarily be the same in Iowa as it would be possibly in Sacramento. Okay, if they were doing it that way, they wanted it to have some sort of local connection. As we know that a lot of media ownership, it's not local usually. There's only a handful of media conglomerates that own just about everything we watch, read, hear, listen to, look on the web, whatever. But yeah, they still wanted some local aspect to it. So you're used to the big mega media companies. I wanted to show you kind of like who owns what in any given market. So I decided for this time to do it with Baltimore market, since you're right there, which you're all very familiar with. Who owns what television station in that market? All right, WJZ, that is a CBS owned and operated. So they are owned and operated by the CBS Corporation in Baltimore, but that's not the same for all the stations that operate in Baltimore. Okay, so the others are owned by other media companies. All right, WBAL is owned by Hearst Television. We're going to talk about newspapers and William Randolph Hearst. Yes, that's the same person. We haven't gotten to that yet. But the people that came after his generations, there's still a Hearst Television out there, and a Hearst Media conglomerate out there. And not as big as the major ones that you know of. There are quite a few other media companies out there that aren't nearly as big as those Disneys and Comcasts and all that. But there are other somewhat nice-sized media companies that are out there. And Hearst Television owns WBAL. And just to let you know that the local affiliate, CBS affiliate, NBC affiliate by me in Lancaster is WGAL. That is also owned by Hearst Television. They own quite a few. So I have that in common. WMAR is owned by a company called the EW Scripps Company. It was a newspaper company for a long time, and it's branched out off to many other types of media companies for many different reasons. But yeah, the EW Scripps Company owns WMAR. The CW is owned by Cunningham Sinclair. CW at one point was a combination of Warner Brothers and some other stuff, and that they eventually became the CW. And then WBFF is Sinclair owned. That is another company, just like Hearst and all that. It's one of the bigger ones, not as big as the mega companies, but still pretty big. My network is Deerfield and Sinclair. Hey, look at that! It gets see, that's the thing about ownership. Yeah, they all say Sinclair. Yeah, well, there's certain rules of how many stations you can own, and sometimes these media companies will create other companies so they can own multiple things. That's why you'll find Deerfield Media or Cunningham Media. Actually, believe it or not, I just read an article that just came out that someone is suing or trying to get the FCC not to give Sinclair license to renew their license because they own so many, and it's supposed to be violating the rules of media ownership. So that's interesting that came out today, and I'm talking about the media companies here. So you may want to pay attention to see who owns what. That seems like it might be something you might see a question sometime in the future. So pay attention to that. Hint, hint, hint. There are some rules now. Yeah, you are allowed, and I know I just talked about that, you are allowed to own more than one station in a certain market. There are limits. Each station needs to have its own license. And sometimes those stations will share facilities, share buildings, antennas, transmitters. And sometimes you'll see, this might be why you see, hey, why is this station's news on this channel? That's why. Basically, the rule is, the way it's supposed to be is ownership of a certain station, the ownership rights can't have one of the top rated, more than one of the top rated stations. So you can have, like, say, a Fox and a My Network, or CBS and a CW in the same. But you're not supposed to have, and it's based on the rating, so I guess it does depend on whatever the numbers are. I'm just using examples that you would think would be the ratings in a given typical market. Occasionally, you'll find ABC, NBC, Fox, or CBS station that might be in the lower tiers. So that might be why a certain company has them, because the ratings for one isn't good. But for the most part, it's usually you usually own one of the major ones, and then one of those other minor, quote unquote, minor networks at the same time. WH in Harrisburg, my market up here, where I'm from, they have the CW and the CBS station owned by the same. They have it in the same building. Heck, they have it in the same, what they call master control. It's in there too. So it's all the same. So just an example I'm giving. Understand what O&O is, owned and operated, because, like I said, television stations, just because they're ABC, Fox, NBC, CBS, does not mean they are necessarily owned by the network. There are certain stations that are owned by the network, and they are called O&Os. And we showed you one with Baltimore and CBS, but it was the only one. Okay, in like Philadelphia, the Fox station is O&O, the ABC, NBC, and usually find that in the top like 10, or at least the top networks like markets, and I'll talk about the markets with that too. These are usually owned by the networks. I mean, your biggest networks, your biggest markets are owned. Like I said, you saw Sinclair and the Scripps and the Hearst Television, and there's other companies such as Tegna and Nexstar and other things like that own a lot of these stations. So let's say you're working for a Fox affiliate like I did in WPMT in York. We were not owned by News Corp. They were owned by something called Tribune. You should be familiar with them from the Chicago Tribune. Yeah, they had other media things. Now they're owned by something called a place called Tegna. They sold them off. But yeah, people always thought, and a lot of people make this mistake. You shouldn't make that mistake, because I'm teaching you that right now. Not all these networks, though they have the call letters and stuff, that doesn't mean they're necessarily owned by the network that they have on. Yeah, most people don't get it, and then heck, I got yelled at for, oh, you work with Fox and you're all evil and bad, and I'm like, we're not even owned by them. Yeah, I actually used to work for that place, that network, but when I was at WPMT Fox 43, I wasn't. And the people are like, what do you mean? Because they don't get it. They just see Fox or ABC or NBC or CBS, whatever the case is. Oh, they're telling you what to do. No, really not. So yeah, that's, if anything, that you can get through, get into your head. Just because they are those specific channels that like lots of affiliates, doesn't mean they're necessarily owned by them. And like I said, there are O&Os out there, but that's not always the case. Hey, there's our friend, the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Before, it was very stringent on how many television stations, radio stations, newspapers you could own. Before that, now it's changed completely. Now it's, with television households, you cannot own, and it sounds a little weird, but in total, you cannot own more than 39% of the total coverage within the country, okay? And there's, so basically that's why you might find that a network might own, a New York and a Chicago and an LA, but they might also own occasionally like a Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not nearly as big as a market, but if they just had, they wouldn't be able to follow the rules of 39%, because if they were just hitting all the big, they would go over that if they were just hitting all the big markets. So that's why you might find, hey, they're an owned and operated it's a station, and it's in a smaller a mid-level or smaller market, and that's because they can't do it in every big market, because if you do it, you're going to go over that 39% threshold of how many people would actually see you. So, and plus there's limits of how many stations can be owned in the market. I gave you that. Yeah, they wanted to reach nationwide audiences when they started creating the networks. But they knew they didn't want them to own everything because that would just be one, massively expensive for them. Not a good business model. Plus control standpoints and management. And that's why they came up with the whole affiliate system. Basically, what an affiliate is that doesn't mean they are owned by that network. It doesn't mean that they are owned by that network. It does not mean they are owned by that network, okay? It is a contractual agreement between the station, that local station, and the network to carry certain programming, certain advertisements. There's compensation fees. There's things such called renewals. They share stuff like promotional content. Also, at least from a standpoint, I've talked about this a little bit before, but every network, CBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, they all have what is called a news service, news feed service to supply international and national news. Usually, a part of that affiliate agreement, they get a subscription to that because they are within that, and they are allowed to get other as an affiliate and still independent of that network. They are still allowed to get other subscriptions to other news services, like at Fox 43 WPMT. Yes, we had the Fox News Edge service, which I used to work with as well, but they also had a subscription to the CNN services, news service for international and national news. So understand that. So basically, it's an agreement. Okay, you're getting all this marketing. You're sharing certain programming at certain times. Certain advertisements come with this programming, and there's some other fees. That's not usually out there but it's part of the business aspect of it. Renewals of contracts, stuff like that. But yeah, that's what that is. The affiliate, it's a business agreement to agree to take on certain things. Occasionally in the past, some affiliates would switch. It doesn't really happen these days because of the way the industry has gone with so few companies owning so much. But occasionally they had like say a 10-year affiliation with CBS, and then maybe another station in the market was an ABC, and they had at the same time their affiliation agreement was different, and then all of a sudden, poof, you would see the CBS station become an ABC and the ABC become a CBS. Like I said, that doesn't happen very often these days, but it used to happen quite a bit. It's like and the network would, either compete with it, or maybe they just didn't want to renew and they go with the other one. That was all part of the business, even though not so much now. But that was part of the history of television with it. And understand what a network is. Yes, we have the big networks, ABC, NBC, Fox, so on and so forth. But basically all a network is understand this. A real definition, and this is very important. You may want to remember this. Hint, hint, hint. Okay? Hint, hint, hint. Hint! Okay, it is a simultaneous broadcasting of an identical program by two or more connected stations. Period. That is the official definition. Okay, so understand that. Any other answer you see is wrong. So you may see this somewhere in the future. Okay? Was I obvious enough for you? Hopefully. Anyway, let's keep going. So history of the broadcast networks. First you had your big three, ABC, CBS, NBC. In 1986, Fox started their broadcast network with things like the Tracy Ullman Show and Married with Children and When Animals Attack, and Cops is probably around that time when it first started. Somewhere around there. It's pretty close to it. But yeah, so for the longest time, it was just those big three, and 20th Century Fox got involved with it. Now they're part of the regular lineup. It's over Fox now has well over 200 affiliates. In 1995, WB and UPN, they merged. They were two separate networks. They popped up in like the early 90s, and they merged and they became the CW. So for CBS and Time Warner, so CW. And then my network was taken over by News Corp at the time. 1998, something you probably don't remember at all, or knew existed. It was called PAX TV. It later became Ion. You probably have it somewhere. It's probably not. You probably don't consider it a major thing, but that was actually a broadcast network. And Univision and Telemundo, they are all Spanish-speaking and Spanish culture television, because they're realizing the demographics have been changing over the last 20 to 30 years, and they're meeting that meeting that demographic. News Corp came out with Mundo Fox, which is also out there between News Corp and Colombian corporate television in outfit down in Colombia. So we're seeing major programming change with the demographic changes. Now, basically, what the affiliate does, they agree to carry programming at a certain time. So, you think of primetime programming, usually for the ABC, CBS, NBC, that goes from 8 to 11. For Fox, it could be anywhere from 7 to 10 or 8 to 10. Usually, I would say it's probably more 7. Depends on the night. Definitely on Sunday nights, they start earlier. But it usually ends by 10 o'clock for your Fox networks. And but technically the affiliates don't necessarily have to take that programming, okay? Because remember, they're their own individual station. They're not owned and operated by the network. So say like there's a blizzard, or the local high school football tournament games are happening, and it's a big rivalry. Sometimes that will be preempt whatever they're putting on, and they'll usually put it on at a later time. The networks are not a fan of that practice mainly because there's commercials. All right, there's commercials that go on. When you think about any major network show and you watch, they have certain commercials that come along with that program. And they've made the deal with those companies, saying, yeah, this is going to be on. All these people are going to see it. So if a local affiliate changes it, they're not going to see it. Then, we saw it later, but it's not going to be in that prime time spot. So they're not a fan of that. There's not much you can do with that under the rules, but. They, in their perfect world, they would always air exactly, and most of the time they do, but things pop up, and that's part of doing business. Certain concessions you have to make. So it also says the agreement says affiliates receive free programming in exchange for providing national distribution for network commercials. So when you think about American Idol. Back in the day, it was on Fox, on ABC, but a lot of things that they would have, they'd have like Ford commercials and Coke. Heck, they'd have Coke placements and all these things, and all these other shows. They might have placement for like Dunkin' Donuts or whatever they're drinking. It's all part of it. Promos that promote other shows within the lineup. So that's part of it. They also get the stations can get network comps, cash from them. Depends on the market size, depends on the popularity of their program. That's where you start seeing your bigger network, your bigger markets will kind of get that. That's another plus back in the day when they were jumping around with affiliates and what they weren't. They give good comps and they get money in taking, if they do well with ratings and stuff. So that would be another reason to change affiliates back in the day. And they'd also get opportunities to insert local commercials. So yeah, you see your national commercials on there, but you'll see the local car dealership on there. This is where they have their national program. They have some commercials maybe at the top of the bottom of each block. But then you also see local commercials, so they got to give the local stations something to be able to sell. Hey, we're gonna put you on during this great this show that's like a #1 rated show these days, and I'm blanking on one right now, which isn't good. But yeah, so that gives them opportunity. Yeah, you'll be right down here, right in the middle of the show that everyone's watching, so they can make money on that. See, it's a business. Okay, which then comes to public television. Now, public television, I know some might not watch so much, but I'm sure each and every one of you used to watch Sesame Street. You're very familiar with Sesame Street, and I usually do this. It's not going to be quite the same.
Sunny day, sweeping the clouds away. On my way to where the air is free. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? Come and play, everything's A-OK. Friendly neighbors there, that's where we meet. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? How to get to Sesame Street? How to get to Sesame Street?
Yeah, I would usually in class see we're missing something. I would hit that, and then it would click open, and sunny days pushing the. I play that out, and it's like he's playing the Sesame Street thing because everybody remembers it and everybody loves it, and it doesn't matter how old you get, it brings back memories. And this is the original lineup of Sesame Street from like 1969. No, I wasn't alive yet, but I still recognize some faces in there. Well, Big Bird and Bert and Ernie, and believe it or not, that's Oscar the Grouch in his original form. He was not great. That's Susan. I can't believe I still remember these people. That's Susan. And this is Bob. Bob was the guy I met, which I got kind of starstruck when I first worked in television in 1995. This was many years after he first started, but he wrote a children's book, and he came to News 12 Long Island, and he did an interview. I'm like, you helped teach me like words and how to count, and thank you so much. But he was much older than that, but he was there for many, many years. And I remember Luis and Maria, and they were the Latino members of the staff of the cast, and they helped teach Spanish and Latino culture to kids. And I remember Linda, and she was deaf, so that helped having kids dealing with people with disabilities. And then there's Mr. Hooper. Nobody knows who Mr. Hooper is. Mr. Hooper died when I was a small child, and that was very traumatic. And he owned the corner store. And if you still go check on Sesame Street, you'll still see a store called Hooper's. That's Mr. Hooper. He was an actual person. And Big Bird, obviously, they had him. He was having a hard time dealing with the death of Mr. Hooper, and they made that part of the episode, and dealing with death. Anyway, but yes, public television has its place. It's different. It's not, they have like member stations. They don't have affiliates. They have a council of people who oversee it. Each station is kind of autonomous, and they are allowed to take certain, they share programming. So that's why if you have a PBS station in LA and a PBS station in Miami, they might not play the Sesame Street at the same time of day, even though they'll both have it, because it's up to them. So there's been a lot of independence with it, but there's still things that they have to live up to as being quote unquote member stations, and it is nonprofit. And they do get government assistance in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. And they're just trying to figure out their way in television, and how to still get by, still operate, but deal with unlimited money, because you can't just write sell commercials. I mean, there's things that they can do with corporations, and I'm sure you've seen the sponsorships for this Civil War documentary is sponsored by the Ford Corporation, or something like that in the opening or the closing with a graphic. Different rules, grants, and other things because it is public television, so they have to follow certain rules. But they're trying to find their own, and they deal with children's and education and other culture and stuff like that. And I'm sure you've seen the telethons, being able to buy a bag, tote bag for $75.99, or the VHS edition collection of Monty Python's Holy Grail, Monty Python's Flying Circus from 1970 something, for way too much money. But they have to find different ways to do it, and they're trying to find their way within this whole new technology. And they've done a lot of stuff on the web, and Sesame Street's now gone to HBO, but they still have it on PBS as well. Never quite go anywhere, never go away totally. But public television trying to find their way to still remain relevant in the world, because now there's other educational stuff everywhere. But remember, it's still technically free because it's still technically broadcast. So, but yeah, they have their spot in it. A couple things I want to teach you about also. Ratings, television ratings. Oh, what's he talking about? You hear about a rating. What is a rating? What is a share? Also, I got this number of rating and this is a share. Basically, there's a difference between the two. You should probably understand it. A rating, and when you hear that, is an estimate of the number of people or households viewing or listening to a particular program based on some universal estimate. So they look at a given market. There's so many people in the city of Baltimore. And this is going by their rating system, which wants you to know it's based on they have like Nielsen families that only a small percentage of the people of actual people are measured for everyone. And all this has to do with setting commercials and advertising rates. And if you have a high rated program, then you can charge more for that given program. Think about the Super Bowl, $5 million for a 30-second commercial. It might even be more now. But yeah, why? Because there's so many people watching it. And this is all, and they've got ratings times and sweeps and times when they really pay attention. But what a rating is, so basically taking the rating percentage is the number of viewers or listeners over the total viewers or listener population. So this is basically, okay, Baltimore in general has so many people in that given population. It could be Baltimore and the surrounding area, the Baltimore market. They know whatever the reach is for this, so they have that flat number. That doesn't take into account people who might not even be watching. So that is total potential, okay? Total potential. And this is the people who are specifically watching over the amount of people there are in a given market, okay? And that's where you get the percentage. So this is the rating is that percentage. And one rating point represents 1% of the population. So a 20 rating means about 20% of the people were watching or listening to that certain program, okay? Understand that. So you have your rating and you have a share. So see, that's the big thing with the rating. It takes everybody into account. Share is different, okay? Share measures the percentage of the listening or viewing audience based on the actual number of viewers or listeners. Shares show how well one program is doing against its competition. There's a couple of things. If you get into this industry, television or radio, they have HUT and PER. You're going to find lots and lots and lots of little abbreviations like that. And especially in industry magazines, stuff like that, the business of television and radio. So that's and they just write it out. They don't define it every time because the people who usually read it know what those things mean. So yeah, households using television or persons using radio, and the share, okay, is the audience, the individual households, okay, of and over the HUT, the HUT or the PER. So this is strictly on people who are actually using that, we'll say in this case, watching television. So say the amount of people actually watching television is over the people who are watching a certain program, say it's American Idol or something like that, over the amount of people who are actually using and actually watching television. That's the big difference. The rating deals with the entire market, and it also counts people who might not even be watching. The share deals with actual people who are watching. Okay, that's the big difference, and it's what percentage of those people watching television are watching that given program at that given time. Rating is more general and takes everybody into account. The share is very much more specific, looking at the amount of percentage of people actually watching that program among all the people watching television. So yeah, the ratings are always smaller than the shares because the ratings consider television sets and radios that are not being used. Shares only calculate those media actually being used, and share totals will equal 100%. Ratings won't. Okay, so that's why, wait, this isn't, you're looking at ratings, it doesn't make sense. It should add up to 100. It doesn't, because it's considering everybody. The share, yeah, it does go up to 100% because it's specifically looking at people who are using it. I know it's a little confusing, and when you're looking at, if you were actually to read something from a television thing, business thing that talks about that stuff, you might look, hey, why is this not working? That's why. If you need some clarification on that, I can try and help, but hopefully you got that. And you should probably understand that, ratings and shares, and understanding of both, that seems important. And we're trying to get into this last bit of it. Programming and syndication. I've heard that word syndication. It's different types of programming. And some of it is obvious, like first run. This is when the program, television show, boom, airs for the first time. It's called first run. Rerun or repeat. You're used to that. They repeat things so every so often. Once they go through that, especially in the summer sometime. And then sometimes networks will repeat a certain program maybe once or twice, and then they'll go to what's called off-network syndication. Just to let you know, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but over the years, television shows, you're like, hey, we're coming up on the 100th episode of whatever show, of Seinfeld, of Everybody Loved Raymond, of American Idol, of, I should come up with newer shows, of the Goldbergs, or, it's 100th. Yes, they're crowing about the longevity of their show and how it's part of the tradition and the family of the network and that aspect. But they're also doing another thing here. They are telling you, hey, 100 episodes, because usually around the 100th to 150th episode, that's when they can start selling seasons of reruns to syndicators, companies that take those and sell those off to your affiliates, because affiliates need programming, right? And so this is why you see reruns on your local stations. And basically what they're doing is, hey, we just hit 100 episodes, television stations. You know what's coming next. You're going to be able to start buying these seasons, these blocks of this program, of reruns, because then you can add it to your programming list. That's part of the reason why they do that. Yes, they do it to crow about their stuff, but they also do it to tell, hey, TV stations, we're going to be able to sell you these older episodes of reruns of seasons so you can put it in your local programming, and that's all part of it. See, it's a business. That's why they do that. And the definition of syndicated program: any programming sold, licensed, distributed, or offered to radio and TV stations in more than one market within the U.S. for non-interconnected, no network, TV or radio broadcast exhibition, but not including live presentations. Anything non-local that are not network programming, and they are, in addition to like reruns, you're very familiar with a lot of first run stuff. So programs directly offered to local TV stations, and they never go to the network usually. Think about Dr. Phil, Entertainment Tonight, Wheel of Fortune, Jerry Springer, People's Court, Access Hollywood, Judge Judy, Jeopardy. These are what they call first run syndicated programming, because they're not on during the prime time. They have their own original and new programming, but it doesn't go to the network. It goes straight to the stations themselves. So yeah, syndicators deal with the reruns, but they also deal with these other programs that you've become very familiar with as well. Off-network syndication, that deals with previously run. These are the reruns. So like I said, every show that had about 100 to 150 episodes. Everybody Loves Raymond, Friends, Seinfeld, The Simpsons reruns, so on and so forth, which I'm sure you've seen many, many times on these stations. They can sign, sometimes a station can sign exclusive rights to a certain season of reruns. So sometimes, like when Seinfeld first came out, or Friends, you weren't able to see it on any other of those stations within the market except that station, because they sign an exclusive rights to that station. And that's part of the whole business as well. Sometimes these deals can say not only how many episodes, but the amount of times you can run them as well. So it's all part of the business and understanding syndication. So the big thing is understanding that syndication deals with reruns, the mark of a network program. So when they start saying, hey, 100, 150 episodes, we're going to give all you local stations a chance to play our reruns, and we'll just got to pay us for that. And then also understand, oh, sorry, what did I do there? Sorry about that. I did something wrong. Sorry, I hit something. I didn't know what I hit. But yeah, so, and sometimes in those deals they can say, okay, you can have this many episodes and this is how many times you can run it. But they get the money off of that from advertising and saying, oh, we've got it. Okay, that's it. That is 2. Okay, stop the share there. Hopefully you learned something in those last 2 things about television, and I will see you on the other side. All right, take care.